Alex was staring at his laptop screen, watching his bank account balance drop lower each month. Being a graduate student meant surviving on instant noodles and hope. His two-bedroom apartment was nice, but way too expensive for one person. He needed a roommate and fast. "I know someone who might be interested," his friend Tom said during their coffee meetup. "Her name is Jessica. She's an art student, seems pretty cool. Want me to set up a meeting?" Alex nodded quickly. At this point, he'd take anyone who could pay rent on time. A few days later, Jessica showed up at his door. She was friendly, with paint-stained fingers and a bright smile. She looked around the apartment, nodding approvingly at the large windows and the spacious living room. "This place is perfect," she said, running her hand along the kitchen counter. "I love how open everything feels. It reminds me of home." They sat down to discuss the details. Jessica seemed responsible enough. She had a part-time job at a local gallery, plus some money from her parents. She could pay her share of rent, which was honestly all Alex cared about at that moment. "I grew up in a big family," Jessica mentioned, settling into the couch. "5 kids, 2 parents, 1 bathroom. We learned to share everything. Privacy wasn't really a thing in our house, you know? We all just made it work." Alex smiled politely. He was an only child who valued his quiet space, but different backgrounds could work out fine. Maybe it would even be good for him to be around someone more social. "Sounds like you're used to roommate life then," he said. "Oh yeah, totally. I'm super easy to live with. I don't make much noise, I clean up after myself, and I'm pretty laid back about most things." They shook hands, and Jessica moved in the following weekend. The first few days went smoothly. She kept her promise about cleaning, and the apartment felt more lively with someone else around. Alex found himself enjoying having company after months of living alone. But then he started noticing small things. Jessica would leave her art supplies on the dining table, even after Alex had mentioned he liked to eat there. She'd invite friends over without asking, assuming Alex wouldn't mind. When he gently brought these things up, she seemed genuinely surprised. "Oh, I didn't realize that bothered you," she'd say, looking confused. "In my family, we never had to ask permission for stuff like that." Alex tried to be understanding. Different families, different rules. He could adjust. The first real problem happened on a Tuesday evening. Alex had just gotten home from a long day at the university library. He was tired, stressed about his thesis, and looking forward to changing into comfortable clothes. He walked into his room and started taking off his shirt when the door suddenly swung open. "Hey, Alex, do you have a phone charger I could borrow?" Jessica asked, walking right in like it was the most normal thing in the world. Alex froze, half-dressed, and completely shocked. Jessica seemed totally unfazed by the situation, looking around his room casually. Jessica," Alex said, quickly putting his shirt back on. "Could you maybe knock first?" She looked at him with genuine confusion. "Oh, sorry. I guess I should have. It's just, in my house growing up, we never really knocked. Everyone just walked into everyone's rooms. We were all family, you know?" "Right, but this is different," Alex said, feeling awkward about having to explain something that seemed so obvious to him. "Yeah, you're totally right. Sorry about that." She grabbed a charger from his desk. "Thanks for this, I'll bring it back later." And then she was gone, leaving Alex standing there wondering what just happened. Over the next week, Alex tried to convince himself it was just a one-time thing. Jessica had apologized after all. She'd said she understood. But then it happened, again. And again. She'd walk into his room looking for something she'd left there, or to ask him a quick question, or sometimes just to chat. She never seemed to remember to knock, no matter how many times Alex mentioned it. Each time she'd give the same explanation about her family being different, and each time she'd promise to remember next time. The situation got more uncomfortable when Alex realized Jessica had a very casual attitude about clothing around the apartment. She'd walk from her room to the bathroom wearing just a towel, or hang around the living room in clothes that made Alex feel like he should look away. When he was raised, people dressed modestly around roommates, but Jessica didn't seem to share that view. "You're so formal about everything," she laughed when Alex mentioned feeling uncomfortable. "It's just skin, Alex. We're all human here." Alex started to feel like maybe he was the problem. Was he being too uptight? His friends had always said he was pretty reserved, but this felt like basic respect to him. He began spending more time in his room trying to avoid awkward encounters. The breaking point of this first phase came when Alex woke up one morning to find Jessica in his room, looking through his closet. "What are you doing?" he asked, still half asleep. "Oh, hey, you're awake. I spilled coffee on my shirt and I'm already running late for class. Do you have something I could borrow?" She was standing there in her underwear and a bra, acting like this was a completely normal way to start the day. Alex sat up in bed, pulling his blanket higher, feeling more uncomfortable than he'd ever felt in his own home. "Jessica, you can't just come into my room like this, especially when I'm sleeping." "Why not? It's not like I was trying to wake you up. I was being quiet." Alex realized that their ideas of appropriate behavior were so different that they might as well be speaking different languages. Jessica genuinely didn't understand why he was upset, and he was starting to feel like a stranger in his own apartment. That evening, Alex called his friend Tom. "How well do you actually know Jessica?" he asked. "Not super well. Why? Is everything okay?" Alex explained the situation and Tom was quiet for a long moment. "That does sound pretty weird, man. Maybe you guys need to have a serious talk about boundaries." As Alex hung up the phone, he realized that was exactly what needed to happen. This wasn't going to fix itself, and hoping Jessica would suddenly change her behavior wasn't working. He needed to figure out how to have that conversation without making the living situation even more awkward. But first, he was going to buy a lock for his bedroom door. Alex installed the lock on his bedroom door the next day. He felt weird about it, like he was being paranoid, but he needed some peace of mind in his own home. When Jessica saw it, she raised an eyebrow. "Really? A lock?" she asked, touching the new hardware. "What's next, security cameras?" "I just like my privacy," Alex said, trying to keep his voice calm. "Whatever works for you, I guess." For about a week, things seemed better. The lock meant Alex could change clothes and sleep without worrying about surprise visits. He started to relax a little, thinking maybe the problem was solved. Then Jessica found other ways to push boundaries he didn't even know he had. It started with his clothes. Alex came home from class one day to find Jessica wearing his favorite hoodie. She was sitting on the couch doing homework, completely comfortable in his clothing. "Hey, hope you don't mind I borrowed this," she said without looking up from her textbook. "I was cold and it was just hanging in the laundry room." Alex stared at her. The hoodie was clearly too big for her, hanging loose around her shoulders. It felt strange seeing someone else wearing something so personal to him. "I would have preferred if you asked first," he said. "Oh, come on, it's just a hoodie. I'll wash it before I give it back." The next week it was his coffee mug, then his laptop charger, then his good headphones. Jessica seemed to view everything in the apartment as communal property, regardless of who actually owned it. "We're roommates," she'd say whenever Alex brought it up. "Roommates share things. That's how it works." But Alex had never agreed to share his personal belongings. He'd agreed to share the apartment, the utilities, the common spaces. His stuff was supposed to stay his stuff. The clothing situation got more uncomfortable too. Jessica's definition of appropriate homeware was very different from Alex's. She'd walk around the apartment in tiny shorts and crop tops, or sometimes just an oversized t-shirt that barely covered anything. Alex tried not to look, tried to act normal, but it made him feel awkward in his own living space. When he gently suggested that maybe she could dress a bit more modestly around the apartment, Jessica laughed. "You're such a prude, Alex. It's hot in here, and this is my home too. I should be comfortable in my own place." Alex didn't know how to argue with that logic, even though something about it felt wrong to him. The worst part was how Jessica treated his personal space. Even with the lock, she'd knock on his door at all hours, sometimes just to chat, sometimes to borrow something, sometimes to complain about her day. The knocking was technically what Alex had asked for, but it felt almost worse than the barging in because it happened so constantly. "Alex, are you awake?" She'd call through the door at midnight when he was trying to sleep. "Alex, do you have any snacks in there?" At dinner time when he was studying. "Alex, can I vent to you about my professor?" When he was on important phone calls. When Alex didn't answer immediately, Jessica would keep knocking, assuming he hadn't heard her. She seemed to think that living together meant being available to each other 24/7. The breaking point came on a Thursday evening. Alex had been working on his thesis all day and was exhausted. He'd locked his door and was finally getting ready for bed when he heard Jessica's key in the front door. She was with friends and they were loud. "This is Alex's room," he heard her say right outside his door. "He's probably asleep already. He goes to bed super early." Then, to his horror, he heard her trying his door handle. "It's locked," she announced to her friends. "He's so paranoid about privacy. It's honestly kind of weird." Alex lay in bed, listening to Jessica and her friends laugh about his need for privacy. They were talking about him like he was some kind of antisocial hermit just because he didn't want people walking into his room whenever they felt like it. The conversation got worse. "He gets all weird when I wear comfortable clothes around the apartment," Jessica continued. "Like sorry for being a normal human being who gets hot sometimes." "Maybe he has a crush on you," one of her friends suggested, and they all laughed. Again. Alex felt his face burn with embarrassment. He wasn't attracted to Jessica at all. He just wanted to live peacefully without constantly worrying about awkward encounters. "I think he's just uptight," Jessica said. "He probably grew up in one of those super strict families where everyone wore turtlenecks to dinner." Alex wanted to bang on the door and tell them they were wrong, that wanting basic respect wasn't the same as being uptight. But he knew that would only make things worse. The next morning, Alex found Jessica's friends had crashed on their couch. They were still there when he left for class, sprawled across the living room in their clothes from the night before. No one had asked if it was okay. Jessica had just assumed he'd be fine with it. When Alex got home that afternoon, the friends were finally gone, but the apartment was a mess. There were empty pizza boxes on the counter, dishes in the sink, and someone had spilled something sticky on the coffee table. Jessica was in her room with the door closed, music playing loudly. Alex started cleaning up, feeling frustrated and tired. This wasn't what he'd signed up for when he'd agreed to have a roommate. He'd thought it would be simple, two people sharing space and expenses while respecting each other's boundaries. But Jessica seemed to think being roommates meant they were practically family, with no personal space or individual ownership of anything. As Alex wiped down the coffee table, he realized the lock on his door wasn't really solving the problem. It was just treating one symptom of a much bigger issue. Jessica fundamentally didn't understand or respect boundaries, and until that changed, living together was going to keep getting more uncomfortable. He needed to have a real conversation with her, not just mention things in passing. But every time he tried to bring up his concerns, Jessica made him feel like he was being unreasonable. Alex sat down on the clean couch and stared at his locked bedroom door. Maybe he was being unreasonable. Maybe this was just how roommates lived, and he was too used to living alone. But deep down, he knew that wasn't true. Respect was respect, whether you were roommates or strangers. And right now, he felt like Jessica saw him as neither a roommate nor a friend, but as someone whose feelings didn't really matter as long as she was comfortable. Something had to change, and Alex was starting to realize that it might have to be him who changed it. Alex decided he couldn't put off the conversation any longer. He'd spent the weekend thinking about how to approach Jessica without sounding like he was attacking her. He even practiced what he wanted to say in the mirror, trying to find words that would help her understand without making her defensive. Monday evening seemed like the perfect time. Jessica was home, relaxed on the couch watching a movie on her laptop. Alex took a deep breath and sat down across from her. "Hey, Jessica. Can we talk for a minute?" She paused her movie and looked up. "Sure, what's up?" Alex had rehearsed this moment, but now that it was happening, his carefully planned words felt clumsy in his mouth. "I wanted to talk about some roommate stuff, just to make sure we're on the same page about things." "Okay," Jessica said, but her tone already sounded a little wary. "I think we might have different ideas about privacy and personal space," Alex began, "and I wanted to see if we could find some middle ground that works for both of us." Jessica closed her laptop completely. "What do you mean?" Alex tried to stay calm and reasonable. "Well, Like when you come into my room without asking, or when you borrow my things without checking with me first. It makes me uncomfortable, and I'd really appreciate it if you could ask before doing those things." Jessica's expression changed. She looked genuinely hurt, which wasn't what Alex had expected. "I never meant to make you uncomfortable," she said. "I was just being friendly. That's how my family always was with each other." "I understand that," Alex said quickly. "I'm not saying you're doing it on purpose. I just think we need some basic guidelines so we both feel comfortable here." "Guidelines?" Jessica's voice got a little sharper. "Like what kind of guidelines?" Alex pulled out his phone where he'd written down some notes. "Just simple stuff like knocking and waiting for permission before entering each other's rooms, asking before borrowing personal items, maybe giving each other a heads up when friends are coming over." Jessica stared at him. "Are you serious right now?" "I'm just trying to make this work for both of us. Alex, we're roommates, not strangers. This is supposed to be our home, not some kind of business arrangement with rules and regulations." Alex felt his stomach sink. This wasn't going the way he'd hoped at all. "It's not about rules," he tried to explain. "It's about respect. I respect your space and your things, and I'd like the same consideration." "When have I ever disrespected your space?" Jessica asked, and she sounded genuinely confused. Alex couldn't believe she was asking that question. "Jessica, you come into my room without permission all the time. You wear my clothes without asking. You had friends over until midnight on a school night without checking if I was okay with it." "Those aren't disrespectful things," Jessica said, her voice rising slightly. "Those are normal roommate things. You're making me sound like some kind of terrible person just for being comfortable around you." "I'm not trying to make you sound terrible," Alex said, feeling frustrated. "I'm just trying to explain how your actions affect me." "Well, maybe the problem isn't my actions," Jessica shot back. "Maybe the problem is that you have unrealistic expectations about what living with someone means." Alex felt like he was in some kind of alternate reality. How was wanting basic privacy unrealistic? "Jessica, most people knock before entering someone's bedroom. That's not unrealistic, that's normal." "Normal for uptight people, maybe," Jessica said. "I've had roommates before, Alex. I've never had anyone complain about me being too friendly or too comfortable in my own home." Alex wondered what those previous roommates had actually thought but had been too polite to say. "This is our home," Alex said, trying one more time. "Both of ours. But that doesn't mean we don't need any boundaries between us." "Boundaries," Jessica repeated like the word tasted bad. "You know what boundaries do, Alex? They create distance between people. They make relationships cold and formal. Is that really what you want?" "I want to feel comfortable in my own apartment," Alex said, his patience finally wearing thin. "I want to be able to change clothes in my room without worrying about someone walking in. I want to know my stuff is going to be where I left it." "I don't think that's asking for too much." Jessica stood up abruptly. "Well, I'm sorry I make you so uncomfortable just by existing in the same space as you. Maybe we're just not compatible as roommates." She grabbed her laptop and headed toward her room, then turned back. "You know what, Alex, I've been trying to be your friend. I thought we could be more than just two people splitting rent. But if you want to live like strangers who happen to share an apartment, fine. We can do that." Her bedroom door slammed, leaving Alex sitting alone on the couch, feeling worse than before he'd started the conversation. Over the next few days, Jessica was true to her word about treating him like a stranger. She barely spoke to him, kept to her room most of the time, and when they did interact, she was coldly polite. But she didn't change her behavior at all. If anything, it got worse. She seemed to go out of her way to do exactly the things Alex had asked her not to do. She borrowed his coffee mug and left it dirty in the sink. She had friends over without warning and didn't bother to keep the noise down. And she still didn't knock before entering his room. When Alex tried to bring it up again, Jessica acted like their previous conversation had never happened. "I thought we were doing the stranger thing now," she said with fake sweetness. Strangers don't have heart-to-heart talks about feelings. Alex realized he was trapped in a lose-lose situation. If he tried to be friendly with Jessica, she took it as permission to ignore all boundaries. If he tried to set limits, she accused him of being cold and unfriendly. The situation came to a head the following Thursday. Alex had an important video call with his thesis advisor, something he'd been preparing for all week. He'd told Jessica about it in advance, asking if she could keep things quiet during that time. 10 minutes into the call, Jessica's music started blasting from her room. Alex tried to ignore it, but his advisor kept asking him to repeat himself because the background noise was so loud. "I'm sorry, Professor Chen," Alex said, muting his microphone. "Let me just check on something." He knocked on Jessica's door, but there was no response over the music. He knocked harder. "What?" Jessica finally called out. "Could you please turn the music down? I'm in the middle of an important call." "What call?" Jessica yelled back. "The one I told you about, with my advisor." There was a pause, then the music got even louder. Alex stood outside Jessica's door, stunned. She was doing this on purpose. She was sabotaging his call because she was angry about their conversation. He went back to his computer where Professor Chen was waiting patiently. "I'm so sorry about this," Alex said. "Could we possibly reschedule?" After the call ended, Alex sat in his room feeling defeated. This wasn't just about different communication styles or family backgrounds anymore. Jessica was actively trying to make his life difficult because he'd asked for basic respect. He thought about their conversation earlier in the week. Jessica had accused him of wanting to live like strangers, but maybe that's exactly what they needed to be. Maybe trying to be friends with someone who didn't respect boundaries was impossible. Alex looked at his laptop and started typing, "How to break a lease," into the search bar. But then he stopped. Why should he be the one to leave? He'd been reasonable. He'd tried to communicate. He'd been willing to compromise. Maybe it was time to stop asking Jessica to respect his boundaries and start enforcing them instead. But Alex had no idea how to do that without making the living situation even more hostile than it already was. All he knew was that the current situation couldn't continue much longer. Alex spent the weekend at his parents' house trying to clear his head and figure out what to do next. His mom noticed he seemed stressed and kept asking if everything was okay at school. He didn't want to dump his problems on her, but eventually, he found himself explaining the whole situation. "Honey, that doesn't sound like a roommate problem," his mom said, folding laundry at the kitchen table. "That sounds like someone who doesn't understand basic respect for other people. But maybe I am being too rigid," Alex said. "She keeps saying I'm uptight and that I have unrealistic expectations." His dad looked up from his newspaper. "Son, wanting privacy in your own bedroom isn't uptight. That's normal human behavior." "Your father's right," his mom added. "When I had roommates in college, we all respected each other's space. It's not about being unfriendly, it's about being civilized." Alex felt better hearing that his expectations weren't crazy, but he still didn't know how to fix the situation. "Have you tried writing things down?" his mom suggested. "Sometimes people respond better to clear written guidelines than verbal conversations." Alex had never thought about that, but it made sense. Jessica seemed to conveniently forget their conversations, but written rules would be harder to ignore. Sunday night, Alex drove back to the apartment feeling more determined than he had in weeks. He was going to create a proper roommate agreement, something official that laid out expectations clearly. No more hoping Jessica would just understand on her own. He spent Monday evening researching roommate agreements online and writing up a document that covered all the issues they'd been having. He kept the language simple and fair, focusing on mutual respect rather than restrictions. The agreement covered basic things like knocking before entering bedrooms, asking permission before, borrowing personal items, giving advance notice for overnight guests, and maintaining appropriate dress in common areas. Alex also included quiet hours during weekdays and guidelines for cleaning shared spaces. He printed 2 copies and left one on the kitchen counter with a note asking Jessica to read it when she had time. Jessica found it Tuesday morning and immediately came knocking on his door holding the paper. "What is this?" she asked when Alex opened the door. "It's a roommate agreement," Alex said. "I thought it might help us both understand what we expect from each other." Jessica looked at the paper like it was written in a foreign language. "You want me to sign a contract to live in my own home?" "It's not a contract. It's just guidelines," Alex explained. "Lots of roommates use them to avoid conflicts." This is insane, Alex. Listen to this. Jessica started reading from the paper. Residents will knock and wait for verbal permission before entering each other's bedrooms. Residents will ask before borrowing personal items belonging to the other resident. She looked up at him. We're not residents, Alex. We're supposed to be friends living together. Friends can still have boundaries, Alex said. These aren't boundaries, these are rules. You want to control how I live in my own apartment. Alex felt his patience running thin. Jessica, these are basic courtesy guidelines that most adults follow automatically. The fact that I have to write them down is the problem. Oh, so now I'm not a real adult because I don't follow your arbitrary rules? They're not arbitrary, Alex said. They're about respect and privacy. Jessica crumpled up the paper. You know what this really is. This is you trying to make me into someone I'm not. You want me to be as uptight and antisocial as you are. Want you to respect my personal space and belongings, Alex said, his voice getting louder. That's not uptight, that's normal. Normal for you, maybe. But I'm not you, Alex. I'm a warm, friendly person who believes in treating roommates like family. If you can't handle that, maybe you should live alone. Jessica threw the crumpled paper at Alex's feet and stormed back to her room. Alex picked up the paper and smoothed it out. He'd tried being diplomatic, he'd tried being understanding, and he'd tried being direct. Nothing worked, because Jessica didn't want to understand. She wanted to do whatever she pleased and make Alex feel guilty for having a problem with it. That evening, Alex printed another copy of the agreement. This time, he didn't ask Jessica to read it. He knocked on her door and waited until she answered. I need you to look at this again, he said, holding out the paper. I already told you what I think about your stupid rules. Jessica, I'm not asking anymore. I'm telling you. These guidelines are non-negotiable. If you want to continue living here, you need to follow them. Jessica stared at him. Are you threatening to kick me out? I'm telling you what the conditions are for us to keep living together peacefully, Alex said. You can either agree to these basic respect guidelines, or we can figure out other arrangements. Other arrangements? Like what? You're going to evict me? Alex had looked this up over the weekend. I can't evict you, but I can choose not to renew our informal agreement when it's time to sign a new lease. Or you can choose to find somewhere else, to live where the roommate is more compatible with your lifestyle. Jessica's face went through several emotions. First shock, then anger, then something that looked almost like respect. You're serious about this, she said. I'm completely serious. She took the paper from his hand and read through it again, more carefully this time. Fine, she said after a long pause. I'll try to follow your precious guidelines, but don't expect me to be happy about it. I don't need you to be happy about it, Alex said. I just need you to do it. Jessica signed her name at the bottom of the paper with sharp, angry strokes. For the next few weeks, Jessica technically followed the rules. She knocked before entering Alex's room, though she did it with exaggerated politeness that made it clear she thought the whole thing was ridiculous. She asked before borrowing his things, but her requests were always phrased like, "May I please borrow your precious coffee mug, Your Majesty?" She also found ways to follow the letter of the law while violating its spirit. She'd knock on Alex's door at inconvenient times just to ask trivial questions. She'd ask to borrow things she didn't actually need, then return them in worse condition than she'd found them. The passive-aggressive compliance was almost worse than the original boundary violations because it made Alex feel like the villain in his own home. You got what you wanted, Jessica would say whenever Alex seemed frustrated. I'm following all your rules. Alex realized that Jessica wasn't actually learning to respect boundaries. She was just finding new ways to express her resentment about having to follow them. But at least his bedroom was private now. At least his belongings stayed where he left them. At least he could have important phone calls without worrying about deliberate sabotage. It wasn't the friendly roommate relationship Alex had hoped for when Jessica first moved in, but it was functional. And after months of chaos, functional felt like a victory. Still, Alex found himself browsing apartment listings online sometimes, wondering what it would be like to live with someone who didn't need written instructions to treat him with basic respect. He also started documenting Jessica's behavior just in case things escalated further. He kept a simple log of boundary violations and passive-aggressive incidents with dates and descriptions. Alex hoped he'd never need to use it, but something told him that Jessica wasn't done pushing back against the new arrangement. The turning point came 3 weeks after Jessica had signed the roommate agreement. Alex was in the kitchen making dinner when he heard voices in the living room. Jessica had a friend over, someone Alex had never met before. "This place is nice," the friend was saying. "How do you like living with a roommate?" Alex tried not to eavesdrop, but the apartment was small, and voices carried. "It's fine, I guess," Jessica said. "Though my roommate is kind of a control freak. He made me sign this whole agreement with rules about knocking on doors and asking permission for everything." Alex felt his face get hot. Here Jessica was complaining about him to strangers again. "Really?" the friend asked. "What kind of rules? Like I have to knock before going into his room even if I just need to grab something quickly. And I have to ask before borrowing anything of his, even stupid stuff like a phone charger." There was a pause, and then the friend said something Alex didn't expect. "Wait, you were going into his bedroom without knocking?" "Yeah, so?" "We're roommates. It's not like I was trying to spy on him or anything." "Jessica, that's really weird. I would never walk into my roommate's bedroom without knocking. That's like basic privacy stuff." Alex stopped stirring his pasta and listened more carefully. "You think I'm weird?" Jessica sounded defensive. "I think going into someone's private bedroom without permission is weird, yeah, especially when they've asked you not to do it. But we live together. We share everything here." "You share the common areas," the friend said, "not each other's private spaces, and definitely not personal belongings without asking." Alex couldn't believe what he was hearing. Someone was finally explaining to Jessica what he'd been trying to tell her for months. "I just thought he was being uptight," Jessica said, but her voice sounded less certain now. "No, he was being normal. I mean, how would you feel if I just walked into your bedroom whenever I wanted and started borrowing your stuff without asking?" There was a long silence. "I guess I wouldn't like that very much," Jessica admitted quietly. "Right. And the fact that he had to write it down and make you sign it means you probably ignored him when he tried to talk to you about it normally." Alex felt a surge of gratitude toward this stranger, who understood what months of conversation with Jessica hadn't accomplished. "Maybe I did," Jessica said, sounding smaller than Alex had ever heard her. "Look, I get it," the friend continued. "You grew up in a big family where privacy wasn't really a thing, but most people didn't grow up that way. Most people need their own space, especially in their bedroom. I never thought about it like that. Your roommate probably felt like he couldn't relax in his own home because he never knew when you might walk in on him." Alex heard Jessica sigh deeply. "Oh God, I think you're right. I've been making him miserable, haven't I?" The conversation moved to other topics after that, but Alex could barely concentrate on cooking. For the first time since Jessica had moved in, someone had made her understand that the problem wasn't his expectations being too high, but her behavior being inappropriate. After her friend left, Jessica knocked on Alex's bedroom door. When he opened it, she looked genuinely uncomfortable. "Can I talk to you for a minute?" she asked. Alex nodded and stepped out into the hallway. "I owe you a really big apology," Jessica began. "My friend just helped me realize that I've been a terrible roommate, and I'm honestly kind of horrified at myself." Alex waited for her to continue. "I never thought about how my behavior was affecting you. I kept thinking you were just being difficult, but you were actually just trying to feel comfortable in your own home." "Thank you for saying that," Alex said. He'd been waiting months to hear those words. "I grew up in this chaotic house where nobody had any privacy ever, and I guess I thought that was normal. But just because that's how I grew up doesn't mean I should force that on other people." Jessica looked down at her hands. "I've been making you feel like a stranger in your own apartment, haven't I?" "Sometimes." "Yeah," Alex admitted. "I'm really sorry, Alex. I don't know why I got so defensive when you tried to talk to me about it. I think I knew deep down that you were right, but I didn't want to admit it." Alex felt some of the tension he'd been carrying for months start to ease. "I appreciate you saying that," he said. "I never wanted to make you feel bad. I just wanted us both to be comfortable here. I know that now. And I want to do better. Not just follow the rules because I have to, but actually understand why they matter. Over the next few days, Jessica made a real effort to change her behavior. She knocked and waited for permission before entering Alex's room, and when she asked to borrow something, she did it politely and returned it promptly. More importantly, she stopped acting like the boundaries were personal attacks on her character. "Thanks for letting me borrow your mug," she'd say when returning his coffee cup, clean and in the same place she'd found it. "I'm having some friends over Friday night, is that okay with you?" she asked before making plans. Alex found himself actually enjoying living with Jessica for the first time since she'd moved in. A few weeks later, they were both in the kitchen making dinner when Jessica brought up their early conflicts. "I keep thinking about how awful I was when you tried to talk to me about boundaries," she said, chopping vegetables. "I made you feel like you were crazy for wanting basic respect." "You weren't awful," Alex said. "You just didn't understand." "No, I was awful. I called you uptight and antisocial and made you feel guilty for having reasonable expectations." Alex considered this. Maybe we both could have handled things better. "You handled things fine, Alex. I was the one who turned a simple roommate conversation into a big dramatic conflict because I didn't want to admit I was wrong." They cooked in comfortable silence for a while. "You know what's funny?" Jessica said. Eventually, "I actually feel more relaxed now that we have clear boundaries. I don't have to wonder if I'm accidentally annoying you because I know what the expectations are." Alex smiled. "I'm glad it's working better for both of us." "Me too. And Alex, thank you for not giving up on me. You could have just kicked me out or moved out yourself, but you kept trying to make it work." "I wanted it to work," Alex said. "I still do." "It is working," Jessica said. Finally. A few months later, when their lease was up for renewal, both Alex and Jessica signed on for another year. They'd learned how to live together respectfully, and their apartment finally felt like a shared home rather than a battleground. Jessica occasionally forgot to knock or borrowed something without asking, but now she apologized immediately when Alex pointed it out instead of getting defensive, and Alex learned to speak up right away when something bothered him instead of letting resentment build up. They never became best friends, but they became good roommates, which was exactly what Alex had wanted from the beginning. Most importantly, Alex learned that setting boundaries wasn't mean or antisocial. It was necessary for any healthy relationship, whether with roommates, friends, or family. And Jessica learned that respecting other people's boundaries didn't make relationships cold or distant. It made them possible.